Hey, it's Bella, and I'm here with my brother.
Hey.
That's Micah, and he's a 7th grader. He goes to Twin Rivers, and his teacher's Miss Camp, so he already knows a little bit about the cell cycle, but I'm going to teach him how the cell cycle is controlled and how disruptions in the cell cycle can cause cancer. And this video is just by me and Micah. So, the cell cycle is a highly regulated cycle and has 3 checkpoints, but Micah, can you tell me a little bit more about the cell cycle before I go into them?
The cell cycle are the events that take place in a cell so it can divide under control.
So there are 3 cell checkpoints in the cell cycle. So there's checkpoint G1, checkpoint G2, and checkpoint M. In checkpoint G1, it checks for damage to the DNA and other external factors. If conditions are good, then the cell will be able to move on and continue to the S phase of interphase. Micah, can you tell me a little bit more about interphase?
Interphase is when DNA is replicated, also known as synthesis.
Alright, good. So now we have checkpoint G2, and it shows that all the chromosomes have been replicated and that the replicated DNA is not damaged before the cell enters mitosis. So Micah, what's mitosis again?
So mitosis is the division of cells that result in two daughter cells that are the exact copy of the original cell.
Okay, that's great. So then we can move into checkpoint M. So checkpoint M determines whether all the sister chromatids are correctly attached to the spindle before the cell enters anaphase. So Micah, what's anaphase?
Anaphase is when the chromosomes move away from another to opposite sides of the spindle. What you were just talking about.
Alright, the spindle, that's great. Okay, so here we have a diagram just so that it makes more sense to you. So as you can see, there's G1 and G2 and then the M phase. So here we have checkpoint G1, and this checks for cell size, nutrients, growth factors, DNA damage, and if everything checks out, it will go into checkpoint 2. But if something's wrong, then it will go into a resting state, which is called G0. G0 is just when the cell never gets to divide. So then if everything is okay, then it goes into checkpoint G2, and that just checks for cell size and DNA replication. If something's wrong, then it will just go to G0, but if everything's okay, we'll go on to checkpoint M. That just talks about the chromosome attachment to the spindle, which we just said. Alright, now we have internal and external signs. So the internal and external signals just provide a stop and go signal for each cell cycle checkpoint. There's MPF, which is the maturation promoting factor, and PDGF, which is the platelet derived growth factor, and it just helps regulate cell growth and division. So MPF promotes entrance to mitosis in the M phase from G2 phase. MPF is activated at the end of G2 and targets specific proteins in specific points of the cell cycle, and it controls their ability to function. MPF is an internal signal, and it degrades the cyclins, which we'll talk about later, and the cyclins just tell the cell to split. So PDGF is an external signal, and it's just a compound from the outside of the cell bonding to the cell, and it tells it to, keep going. So kinesis controls the cell cycle. So first we have our cyclin and then cyclin-dependent kinesis. So a cyclin is just a cellular protein, and it plays a key role in regulating the cell cycle. It allows the cell to pass through the G2 checkpoint, and it's just a compound in the cell that tells the cell, yo, you should split, dude. So the cyclin-dependent kinesis is a protein that is only activated when it's attached to a particular cyclin. CDK signals the cell to just keep it moving. Okay, so now we're up to the disruptions of the cell cycle, which the video is really about. So, Micah, what do you think happens when the cell cycle is disrupted?
Cancer?
Yeah, that's right, Micah. Alright, so disruptions in the cell cycle can cause cancer. So what cancer is a disease in the body caused by uncontrolled division of cells. So when a cell is normal and it goes through all the signals and the DNA replications, it goes through all the checkpoints and everything's smooth, then it's controlled. But when it's not controlled, or there's mutations in the cell, then that means that it's uncontrolled. And if it doesn't go to the checkpoints, then all the signals aren't working, and that means that the cyclins aren't working, and the cyclins control the division of the cell, so uncontrolled cyclins lead to cancer. Uncontrolled cell growth is cancer. Alright, so now we have a diagram to make this all make sense. This diagram shows like 2 ways that the the cell cycle can lose control. One way leads to apoptosis. Apoptosis. Alright, and that's just cell suicide. So that's when the checkpoints will figure out that something's wrong in the cell and it will just die. But cancer is when there's a mutation and the checkpoints don't really get that the cell is like being crazy, and it just keeps going, and there's uncontrolled growth. And what is uncontrolled growth? Cancer. All right, there we go. That's the cell cycle and how disruptions occur and what disruptions are, and I hope that helps.